evening all. Trying to find a biscuit around the house at the moment. There doesn't seem to be one around. This could be disastrous. But hopefully by the end of the episode we will get a biscuit from somewhere. Okay, so this week I'm not going to do the traditional recap of this last week's goings on in the news, because I think my compadres in this commentariat game will have it all well covered. Everything from the Conservative leadership race to Boris Johnson's nosy neighbours. Will there be war with Iran? Will Trump get impeached yet again? All this stuff that's just going round and round and round. I don't mean to make light of it. I think there's going to be some very interesting things to be said about it, but I don't want to go over the same ground as everybody else. And I think, knowing them, I would just be parroting a lot of what they were saying. So I want to do something very different for this episode of The Biscuit. And this format, this kind of talking to camera thing, has been going on for just over a year for me. And it's brought a lot of rewards. I mean, it's quadrupled my subscriber count since last year, and my Twitter followers have increased, and it's all great. And thanks once again for everybody who gives me words of encouragement and gives me feedback, and has really encouraged me to get stuck in with the kind of anti-left, I would say broadly right-wing, including the centre, ground of political commentariat. Having met some of you, it's all been great. I really enjoy it. And to those few people who really dislike me, let's meet up sometime. I think we can be friends. Anyway, that's enough love in the room for now. So what do I want to do this week? Well, last year I did a list of the 10 people who I thought defined the progressive left. These were 10 people who at the time were in the public eye, who I felt was shaping the discourse. They had become popular, some of them had become buzzwords, and others were movers and shakers that were shaping the discourse at the time. So I've recently gone back, looked at that list, and noticing how many of them are still relevant 12 months on, have new people come in. So I'm going to do my top 10 for 2019, and it's interesting to see who is still on the list from last year and who has dropped out and for what reason. So stay tuned. I'm going to start with those who have dropped out of the list, and I'll explain my reasons why I think this is so. So I've got it. I have it here, a piece of paper. So one of them is Samantha Bee. Now, I said that she was kind of pioneering the anti-comedy movement, and I still think that holds, that she is doing this, but I don't think she's particularly relevant. I think she doesn't have many fans in Normie Land. I think she plays to a very select niche audience, and she seems to have been supplanted by people who are taking anti-comedy even further, like Hannah Gadsby and Michelle Wolf. I think they've taken anti-comedy on even further than Bee. Bee's been left behind, so she's no longer relevant. Who else? David Hogg. Now, at the time, Hogg was the face of Ute activism with his malevolent stares at the camera. I hate you, America. Trying to channel Charlie X from Star Trek. But even though he's still kind of around, he's very much on the periphery, because his thunder has really been stolen by Alexandria occasional Cortex, who I'll get back to in a minute. She seems to have sucked up all the publicity and all the attention of other people that would have made my list. So it's kind of left Hogg as a kind of, remember that guy? Still trying to get a foot on the activism ladder and on TV, but events are passing him by. Who else? Maxine Waters. She was Ms. Scary Ass of the Democrat Party in 2018. But with the Kavanaugh hearing, she shot her bolt a lot. She staked a lot on Christine Blasey Ford's testimony, and when that kind of blew up in the Democrats' faces and Kavanaugh got through and things were revealed that Ford's testimony was full of holes and inconsistencies, and that you couldn't try a man on the basis of her evidence. Waters' star has fallen. Now, I don't know, I'm not in America, she might be a little bit more prominent than that, but considering that in 2018, in the summer of 2018, she had some notoriety around the world, and that's kind of dried up. Anita Sarkeesian. She's dropped off my list of movers and shakers. Not that she's really gone away, but I think with the financial problems of Feminist Frequency and the fact that, again, events are passing her by, she's promising to stick her oar in the development of the Cyberpunk 2077 game. So she might come back. I'd say, rather than that she's yesterday's person, I'd say she's dormant at the moment, but like a volcano, she'll probably erupt at some point soon. But for now, she's not on the top 10 movers and shakers. Maybe she's in the top 20 or 30, but she ain't making the top 10. The other two who I think have dropped off the list are Justin Trudeau and Jack Smith IV. In both cases, they've been involved in scandal in the last 12 months, particularly with Trudeau. It's taken the lustre off his star appeal that he had last year. And his reputation at home and abroad hasn't really recovered. I also think the trip to India was a bit of a disaster, and people saw him as a buffoon. In the case of Jack Smith IV, this is interesting, because he too had a Me Too sex scandal attached to him. And at the time I did his video on top 10 people on the left, I said it wasn't him specifically, he was a cardboard cutout representation of the kind of activist who masquerades as a journalist in order to smear opponents and to present a completely distorted, one-sided and dishonest narrative at the expense of truth. And what's happened with Smith is that he's fallen out, but he's got a like-for-like replacement in Carlos Maza, and that's where I want to start my new 2019 top 10 list by talking about Maza. Maza is, as we've seen, all the things that Jack Smith did, but I think worse, because we can clearly see how he operates. For years, he doesn't let Stephen Crowder bother him, and then all of a sudden, Stephen Crowder's jibes, schoolboy level jibes, suddenly get to him, and it's harmful, and it's hurtful, and it's hate speech. Maza used all the tricks in his book to not only affect Crowder, but to create this latest ad apocalypse on YouTube, and to do huge amounts of damage to YouTubers in general and to the alt media. And I think we're going to feel the repercussions of Maza's actions for years to come. What absolutely despicable, devious operator Maza is. And that's why I think he's now new on the list. I'm going to deal with the people who are still on the list before I get to new people. And kind of at a non-moving spot is Owen Jones. Now, Jones hasn't done anything to boost his profile or his activism in the last 12 months, but he's still there as a persistent whine. He has had quite a lot of meltdowns on television political programs, and I think perhaps TV producers are getting a little bit fed up with the histrionics, but he's still there with his Guardian column. Now, what's interesting about Jones is this kind of shift that he's been going through in the last 2 to 3 years, where he was very sceptical about Jeremy Corbyn a couple of years ago, but now he is 100% totally on board with Corbyn. And to do that, he's had to perform a number of mental gymnastics. Now, this is the guy that came to notoriety in the first place by writing a book called Chavs about how the Britain's social underclass were being demonised. So he rode on the coattails of being the friend of the working classes, and yet in recent months he's made it very plain on social media that he is not working class, he is middle class. He's very proud of the fact that he's middle class, and in the proceedings he is kind of throwing the working class under the bus as he has to shape his whole mind and being towards becoming a fully fledged member of the left-wing chattering classes who are lockstep behind Jeremy Corbyn. Speaking of Corbyn, he's another non-mover off the list. They're at number 8, and again, persistency is winning out, despite scandal after scandal, despite disastrous local government election results, despite bad European parliamentary election results. He's still there and is showing no signs of relinquishing control. He has got pretty much complete control over the Labour Party, to the point where some of the old Blairites like Chukwuemanu and Chukwuemanu have gone on a strange circuitous journey around the political parties. Expect Chukwu to show up at the Green Party next. But for sheer persistence, Jeremy Corbyn is still there, despite all the anti-Semitism arguments, despite bad election results. Some polling companies put his Labour Party ahead of everybody else, on course to win the next general election. I am very sceptical about that, but for persistency, he's still here. And we've got another one, Sadiq Khan. Yes, he's still on the list from last year. His is a case of not so much persistence, but it's you're watching a man spiralling downwards, ever downwards, as his incompetence in the role of Mayor of London increases. He's sought to deflect the attention away from the horrible crime problems that are racking London, the social breakdown of communities, and the pretty much London losing its connection and identity with the rest of the United Kingdom. And he brushes us off by trying to make us focus on evil Brexiteers and evil Donald Trump. People say that Trump started this spat with Sadiq Khan, but this has been going on a lot longer than before either Mr. Trump was president or Mr. Khan was mayor of London. They have history. They just don't like each other. They're two different kinds of men. But Khan's weakness just keeps going on and on and on. And it might come to saturation points with people. But I think one of the effects is that if Sadiq Khan was a national politician, if he was the leader of the Labour Party, he would absolutely get trounced. But I think we are seeing that London is becoming almost an independent state, more than, say Scotland or Wales. It's starting to become really disconnected with the rest of the country. And that actually is a bad thing for your capital city to have an identity that is completely divorced from the rest of the country. But there he is, Sadiq Khan. So, the last of the non-movers from 2018 is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Of all the people that were on the 2018 list, she has just exponentially skyrocketed in fame and notoriety. And she's done this through a tactic of hypercharging all debates. You see, when you haven't got facts on your side, remember she's got her truth, and, what are facts anyway? So she hasn't got facts, and she hasn't got the debating skills, and she's not that great at the rhetorical stuff either. So she's got to go for hypercharged sound bites. That's the cornerstone of her political game. So she goes on the climate change angle a lot. We've got 12 years to save the Earth. And then she recently tweeted out that a fire at an oil refinery in Philadelphia is climate change. The oil refineries just spontaneously combust, like a stain, like a globule, right? And so she does that, and she's gone with the immigrant detention centres on the border. She's likened them to concentration camps, calls them concentration camps. She's trying to do that tactic of putting in the public's mind the link between what's going on in America and Nazi Germany. It's a shoddy left-wing trick which they've been doing for the last couple of years. Cortez she's just shameless, and she does it louder and bolder than anybody else, and she's quite Teflon coated when people call her up on facts. Don't bother her with the facts. So she has gone on, and the net effect is of Cortez's style and personality is that she has pretty much sucked all the oxygen out of anybody around her. So remember last year I was talking about David Hogg, I was talking about these kind of young activists. She sucked all the air out of their sails, leaving them no wriggle room. You're focused on Ocasio-Cortez front and centre. She will articulate all your hang-ups. And it's also had an effect on the Democrat Party as a whole. She is, again, sucking the oxygen away from those Democrats who were prominent last season. And now we've got the March of the Blandies. Pete Buttigieg, that guy, and also Beto O'Rourke, the Jay Peterman of American politics. Just as an aside, read out quotes from Beto O'Rourke and just stick Elaine in there, and think of it in the voice of Jay Peterman from Seinfeld. So Ocasio-Cortez cannot run for president herself because she's too young, but boy, she's just absolutely dominating the space. She's setting herself up for a presidential run in a few years' time. So let's crack on with the noobs. And the first of my noobs on this list is Jess Phillips. Yeah, she could have made the cut last year, actually. She could have made the cut any time the last 2 years. But what she's done is that she's made this list because of her spat with Sargon of Akkad over that non-rape joke. And the way she's milked the publicity out of it, a comment that she barely acknowledged at the time 3 years ago, and since then she has traded on her self-image as this kind of tough bitch in her words. And yet along comes Carl Benjamin, a guy running to be a UKIP MEP. Objectively, he is nothing to her. They're not even in the same orbits, and yet she was able to flip from tough bitch who takes all the men on to, I'm a victim because of a joke about something not happening to me. And she's milked the publicity machine for all it's worth, and the knock-on effect has been to see how people are defending her over this. As I said, in spite of objectivity and looking at this from a neutral perspective, people have been coming up with all kinds of bizarre reasons why she is a victim and not the tough bitch that she says she is, and trying to create a hagiography of her. She's also got into trouble, if that's the right word, over her confrontation with Muslim members of her community who do not want LGBT stuff taught in schools to their children. And so she's kind of in this dichotomy where, once she was the champion of Islam, and now she has to take them on because her left-wing feminists woke credentials are being challenged by the very people that she was championing not that long ago. And to see this kind of the disconnect, the matter and antimatter trying to be contained within her brain has been interesting. So she has come in and really taken centre stage in British politics. And that's just the feature about my 2019 list. Fewer Americans, more British people. Why is that? Well, let's have a look. See, in America, AOC has kind of, as I said, sucked all the oxygen and publicity away from her compatriots. In this country, the status of the left is very much up for grabs as to who's the movers and shakers. And what it's done is it's thrown people into the mix on the progressive left who really have no business being there. And for this choice, I'm putting Victoria Derbyshire in here. She's a BBC journalist and interviewer. And according to the BBC, they're supposed to be politically impartial. And yet, Victoria Derbyshire has kind of imported some of the journalistic tactics of American TV networks in being unashamedly on one particular side on any given topic, and that side is invariably that of the progressive left. Now, I'm not talking about official Labour. I'm not sure Victoria Derbyshire is enthusiastic or keen about Jeremy Corbyn's Labour, but the ideology of the progressive left is very much front and centre in her reportage. She gave a kid gloves interview with Jess Phillips, putting words in Jess Phillips' mouth like, should Carl Benjamin be banned for life from running for office because he told a non-rape joke. And she sat side by side with Jess Phillips, whereas she was front on and confrontational with Carl, and very aggressive. Then there's the Trump balloon in the studio on her show for no apparent reason other than to signal what she and her production team think about Mr. Trump. So there's no impartiality there. She's come under a lot of criticism from people who are not on the left for her style and her show, and yet she is enjoying all the protection from the BBC, who keep maintaining that she is a top-notch journalist and interviewer, when the public clearly thinks otherwise. So she should not be on this list, and yet she is, because she is basically playing all the progressive talking points. She is the establishment, chattering class, progressive lefty, and you and me, the taxpayers, the licence fee payers, we're funding her. Thank you, BBC. Another person who shouldn't be on this list, but who is Rory Stewart, a Conservative MP on the top 10 progressive list for 2019. Surely some mistake. And yet, here he is. And I think few of you who are on the political right would disagree with me over this choice. Now, Rory Stewart is the media's darling when it comes to Conservative politicians. They pushed him absolutely front and centre, poured love on him, and the progressive left metropolitan class absolutely lionised him. The future of the Tory party, the Tory that would get me voting Tory. And he has done this by having to go to the left. Now, he has said, although not explicitly, but a lot of people around him said, well, he's just moving the Conservative Party to the centre. And I disagree. I think the Conservative Party was already in the centre. It had moved to the centre some time ago, nearly 10 years ago, it moved to the centre. What Rory Stewart wants to do is move it even further left into the progressive left's territory. And if you have a look at his background, it's obvious this is what he's doing. This was a man who was in Labour, but left Labour because he didn't get stuff done. He joined the Conservatives because he thought they could get stuff done. But what stuff does he want them to do? Well, obviously he doesn't want them to do anything conservative. Everything from his local people's councils, which will just get hijacked by activists, to reintroducing some kind of national service, through to pushing the withdrawal agreement back onto everybody and say it's either that or nothing. Pandering a lot to the left, pandering a lot to Remainers. This is not a Conservative. This is a man who essentially wants to take the mainstream right-wing party in the United Kingdom, and we don't have many others. So, I know there's a lot of people who want the Conservative Party to die, wither, dry up, and cease to exist. But there is nothing to replace it. There's nothing on the right of British politics that's organised to take its place. So Rory Stewart wants to take what's left of the Conservative Party and move it firmly into Blairite Labour, Liberal Democrat territory, perhaps even reaching out to Jeremy Corbyn's Socialist Labour and to the Greens and to whoever. But what he won't be reaching out to is people on the mainstream right, which is why he's on this list. Well done, Rory Stewart. Yes, you've made it onto the top 10 progressive left-wing list. At number 2, and believe me, he almost made the cut last year, but narrowly missed out, and that was Guy Verhofstadt. Yes, representing European politics. Verhofstadt, if anything, since last year has become more insane. His backing of a European army, and in fact, he's put all other policy initiatives of his on hold. This is really to spend 12 months pushing the idea of a European army onto everybody. This is what he does. He basically maps out a vision for Europe that just jars with the majority of the British public. And yet he still keeps coming back because our media loves pushing him. And his odious Twitter account, believe me, his Twitter account is so obnoxious. But why do you want the European army, Guy? Well, he provided that in the tweet. We're going to send it to Syria and sort out Assad. Yeah, no thanks. And what else has he been saying? Well, we need to expand the European Union into Africa. Oh, great. Great, as if we didn't have enough problems with mass migration, economic migration going on. You want to kind of open up the EU to Africa as well? Where does this all end? And the fact that he does it with a kind of almost insane fervour as well. It's been difficult to get the progressive left to make a defence of him that sounds convincing. Well, no, he's a fanatic. You can't listen to him. Well, if he's such a fanatic, how come he's the European Parliament's Brexit spokesman? If he's so fanatical and just ignored and just an irrelevance in European politics, how did he get the position that he currently holds? How come he has? If you go to the continent, he is very prominent. Don't give me that. Oh, he's just a loon. You know, he's just one man, just one loon. Yeah, this one loon seems to have a lot of pull and prestige within the European Union setups. Don't give me that. He's just this one loon you can ignore. So, well done, Guy. You've made it onto the list this year. So, who's at number one? Can you guess? It is Ash Sarkar. Now, why her? Because she's not as prominent on this list as, say, Jeremy Corbyn, Jess Phillips, Sadiq Khan. Nor does she hold a position of power like some of these elected officials. So why Ash Sarkar? Well, it's because she has got onto the BBC, remember, funded by you, the licence payer, and declared herself to be literally a communist. Literally a communist. Now, in normal times, not in clown world, she would just be treated with the same kind of derision that Nick Griffin of the BNP would be treated, or Oswald Mosley, sort of communist, fascist, no place other than on our national TV screens, other than with extreme scepticism and rebuttal. But she gets a free pass because this is where we're living now. Literally, a communist can get onto our TV screens and peddle her ill thought out, sometimes nightmarish scenarios where she just promotes so much bunk. And her company, Navarro Media, holds a huge amount of influence over the BBC. They get on there regularly, and you just think, why is this so? In other times, this would not be permitted, but she exemplifies the landscape that we're now in, that literally a communist can get onto our state broadcaster and push for implementation of very dangerous socialism without so much as a strong pushback. She gets the mildest of pushback. She gets lots of airtime. It took David Starkey to knock her down a few pegs in the way that only David Starkey could knock someone down a few pegs who hasn't got their facts straight and who's arguing a sort of convoluted and ill thought out premise. But that's where we are. She is not because she's bringing anything particularly new to the table. It's just the fact that she has been allowed to sit at the table in the first place that puts her on the list. So, what do you think of the 2019 movers and shakers on the progressive left? Do you have other ideas? I'd be keen to know. But while we still reel over the fact that Ash Sarkar is on the BBC. We just have to remember stuff like that really does. Take the biscuit. I found one. Yay! It's stale.